Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Lovely to be with you all again. I hope you and yours are fine. It's been a week since we had the main show. And as always, so much going on. Lots to talk about. It's been a heck of a week. Every week seems to be a heck of a week these weeks. But before we get started, if you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe. And if you like the show as it goes on, hit the like button, because it all helps with the algorithms and gets us out there. Although our numbers are climbing up every week, we're into huge numbers. We want to keep it going and get the word out there. So to join me, I have my crew of friends, colleagues, and good old independentistas. Over there in North Dakota, it's the Coatbridge Cavalier himself.
Howdy.
Mr. Boswell, how are you?
Splendid again, always going well here. It's a bit hectic, a bit mad. Far from the madding crowd and all the machinations of British and Scottish politics. But to be honest, been really busy this week, so I've not been up to date. There's not much going on. It's just, there's so many moving parts and so many subplots and what's really going on. The amount of investigation you got to do to find out what's really going on is beyond, it goes beyond the pale. It's a full-time job.
Tell me about it. And down there in the borders, we have Dr. Yvonne Ridley. Yvonne, my dear friend, how are you?
Hi, Roddy. Yes, I'm great. Thank you. I've had a lovely day on the beach at Portobello in Edinburgh with the Prism dog, Bertie. And so I'm hoping he'll be really quiet now because he's exhausted and ready to rock.
Good. You're the dog, which? And of course,
Bertie, that squirrel.
Come on. And from Clickbannon, Eva.
Hi, Roddy. It's been another very busy week. We're hot foot from another wee Alba book event in Kirkcaldy. It was this week and well attended and really quite inspirational, listening to Alec, Neil Hanby and Jackie Bister talking. So as Phil said, it's all go.
Yeah,
once
indeed.
more.
I think Alec had a bigger crowd than the Tory conference, but we'll come on to that. So, folks, been a heck of a week. And to me, the top item, there's so many different things we've got to discuss. But I want to start with, on Friday, the Stone of Destiny was removed from Edinburgh and taken down for the coronation of the English King. Trekkie, can you put up the first clip we have of that act of treason? If our leader was the Wallace or the Bruce, they would have given their life to have protected that Stane, let alone standing there colluding with our imperial oppressors to let them take away. The first thing I'm going to say as make out right away I'm a Republican. But the thing is that Stone of Destiny is the famous pillow of Abraham. And it's for Scots kings. It was stolen by Edward Longshanks and has been used by English monarchs, but it's a Scottish relic. So why, and people should need to know that this coronation, this on the 6th of May, is to make him the King of England, not the King of Scots, the King of England. In my opinion, if he wants to get his arse on the Stone of Destiny, he should do it up in Edinburgh when he's up taking the oath to Scotland. And the fact that our SNP, the Party of Scottish Independence, have handed back our Stone of Destiny so easily. And even although people are saying, it's a kludgy state, it's not the real state, that's not the point. It is seen as the symbol of Scottish sovereignty and should not have been handed over at all, in my opinion, but certainly not without a fight.
Absolutely. That's what we would do as Scots. I mean, there's one of the headlines was returned to England. Returned to England from Well, it was stolen from us and borrowed. So not happy with this at all, but really unhappy about the SNP and particularly Holmes's collaboration here. This is akin to what Mr. Quisling did. This is a betrayal again. You should be fighting for the people of Scotland for their rights. And I know some will say it's only a symbol, but historically there is precedence here for the Scots king to be declared separate from the English king. If you look back in history now, I don't need to go into the detail in that, but one thing's for sure: if we are serious as a nation about being independent, we should be making much more of insults like this. You look at this guy Charles. You listen to his speeches. He's lost. The guy's a clown. The guy's a waste of space, and the monarchy's on a real sugary peg here. And we should be the sand and the Vaseline for these buggers. We really ought to be giving them some serious problems at every opportunity. We should not be kowtowing. It's that religion again, and he's doing what Nicola did. He's a kowtowist monk. He just bows his head. It's a new religion for those who acquiesce to their imperial masters. Not good enough, Humza. You're a shite bag. Not happy with you at all.
Yeah, to me, he's playing. He's playing at being First Minister, Phil. He did the same. As soon as he became Cabinet Secretary for Health, he couldn't wait to get into hospital and put on the scrubs and the mask and look like Dr. Kildare. I'm sure he is Dr. Kildare, but I can't remember the name of the doctors in Grey's Anatomy or anybody else. I'm an emergency ward 10 type guy. But that's what he was doing, playing at it. Now, here's the thing, Yvonne. From a political point of view, he could have still done a couple of things and won favour on, very easily in Scotland by saying, on the coronation for a start, saying, I'm not going. I'm going to march with my fellow patriots. That would have won him so many brownies. He would have cut the legs away from all the other independence parties, from the bloggers like me who are constantly attacking them for their lack of showing any bottle towards independence. With this Stone of Destiny, he could have said, no, you're not getting it. And he could have called thousands of Scots to come and defend the stone and let them come in and take it by force. And he would have been a hero, a patriot. But he stood by, here, take it. Do you want me to carry it out to the van for you? It was quite disgusting.
Well, once again, he's grabbed a defeat out of the jaws of victory. I mean, this is the guy who was portraying himself for years as a dyed-in-the-wool Republican. And yet, as soon as the coronation invites came out, he was like a rat up a drain pipe. He couldn't wait to be the first to say, yes, I'm going. Sinn Féin are going, which surprises me, but at least they waited until it almost became a cliffhanger. Will they, won't they? But he was first in line, doffing his cap, and he's just destroyed all his Republican credentials to this self-serving, dysfunctional royal family. They've turned the coronation into, it's like an episode of EastEnders and Coronation Street. Will Harry turn up? Will this one turn up? Will Meghan be there? And he's got embroiled in the whole drama of it all. I'm glad I'm going to be at the All Under One Banner March on May the 6th. And I would urge everyone to rock up to that and show their disdain to the First Minister. He might be a patsy to the royals, but you know what, Humza? The great only look great as long as they keep you on your knees. Stand up, bonny lad, and get a backbone and some spine. He could have, as you said, Roddy, he could have really scored a major victory here.
Yep.
It was like watching Harry Kane take that penalty that knocked England out of the World Cup.
No, let's be honest, that was great. That was fantastic. No, we loved that penalty.
Well, there he was, virtually, nothing between him and an open goal. All he had to do was say, all right, you can have your stone, but we want some concessions first.
That's another one. Yep,
And,
absolutely.
Let's have a referendum, or
Correct.
give us some recognition that we have the right to self-determination.
Absolutely.
He could have literally held the king over a barrel or over the stone and said, okay, you can have the stone, but first we want you to do this.
Correct.
Instead of going along like some patsy, handing over the stone, he looked pathetic. It was demoralizing. All he had to do was to get on STV and make a call for us all to go to Edinburgh Castle and stop the English from taking the stone.
Correct.
That's all he had to do, and I bet people would have turned out and loved him for it. But yet again, like Harry Kane, he was way off beam.
It was. You're right. They could have said that. He could have
an opportunity.
He could have, yeah. He could have run to Rishi Sunak and said, by the way, the Crown are wanting the stone next week, next month, whatever it is. Now, unless you agree to this Section 30 we want, it's not going to happen. I'm going to call out the Scots people to do exactly what you said. But no, they don't. They have no. The previous First Minister said this one. They have no political nous whatsoever. Even before I ask your opinion on this as well, so I really want that. I'd like to show what a real leader does and says. Techie, can you put up Mr. Salmond, what he says about the Stone of Destiny?
Today I noticed that the Stone of Destiny was taken from Scotland to England. And I also heard the Lord Lion of King of Arms and various other folk say that we should all be incredibly proud that Scotland is going to be represented at the coronation by our stone being such an important and integral part of the ceremony. That's certainly going to be a real surge for me. What a historical insult to the country. The Stone of Destiny was only ever underneath the coronation chair in Westminster Abbey because it was ransacked, pillaged, stolen in the 1290s by Edward Plantagenet, Hammer of the Scots. And the reason he sat on it and wanted all his successors to sit in it was to symbolise English overlordship over Scotland. So we have to be proud to continue the tradition.
I'm sorry asking you to follow that, Eva, but Alec is 100% right. It's an insult.
Well, some people say it's only a stone, it's not the real McCoy, it's a replica, the real one's hidden somewhere else, but none of that matters.
No.
Because the symbolism is so very important. It's a symbol of Scottish sovereignty, it's a symbol of the sovereignty of the people of Scotland. And that was something that Edward Longshanks, Hammer of the Scots, recognised all these hundreds of years ago. And yet, in modern day Scotland, we've got a First Minister who seems not to understand that same damn thing, that it's about the power of the people. Where that would take you on to is that you would think politically, what should Hamza have done? He should have put his foot down, as Yvonne has said, and he should have said to the Prime Minister and to royalty, you're not getting it. You're not getting it. It's ours. It was stolen from us. It was repatriated in 1950 by Ian Hamilton and others, and then you stole it back again. And when we got it back from you in, was it 1996 or so, we ought not to have agreed any conditions on which it would leave Scotland ever again. And the fact that Hamza, as you say, almost carried it out speaks volumes for how out of touch he is. Not necessarily with all of the people of Scotland, because there are different views, but how out of touch he is with the people of the independence movement of Scotland, who say categorically to a man, to a woman, that the people of Scotland are sovereign. And that's the lesson that Hamza has got to take from this. You know, on a daily basis, we're seeing news coming out that we don't like. We are cringing every single day because of the mistakes and the gaffes and the errors that Hamza and those around him are making or we're hearing about. And it's getting to the stage where it's really embarrassing. And watching him standing beside that stone as it was carried out was another cringeworthy exercise. You know, the man has really got to start doing what he promised a few years to do when he was first part of the cabinet, and it was to stand up for Scotland. How the hell is it standing up for Scotland to meekly bow the head to the future king, which is what Nicola Sturgeon did on his visit here last year? And that's, I mean, there's an image of that where she's
we have that image
right down. In contrast to, for example, Michelle O'Neill, who looked him in the eye as she shook his hand, you know, was reminiscent of Theresa May bending the knee. What Hamza has done, handing over that stone without any bargaining whatsoever, is show that the Scots remain subservient, just as we were all these hundreds of years ago. And the people of Scotland will not stand for that. You know, Hamza has to understand that he's got a job to do. And his job is, at the moment, not just to run the government, but to front up the Scottish independence movement. I mean, I see what he did is he's announced that this weekend, I think tomorrow, Saturday, is to be a day of action for the SNP. He's given his members 2 days' notice of that, and it's only to try and divert the headlines away from other stuff. It is mortifying. So I would say to him, you make sure that stone comes back here and you make a solemn vow to the people of the Scottish independence movement that it will not leave Scotland again.
No, I agree. And well, hopefully there'll not be another king either of Scotland, or king of Scots, should I say. Phil, two things. Earlier in the week, Humza went summoned down to London to have an audience with Rishi Sunak. Here's another thing he could have done. He could have been saying, no, you're coming up here for the Tory party conference at the weekend. You can pop in and see me, because I want to talk to you if you want this Stone of Destiny to leave in the plane with you, because it's probably on that plane back to London with Rishi Sunak. That's probably where our Stone of Destiny is. And said, no, you come and speak to me. But no, he meekly went down there. And what did he do? He asked again for a Section 30. To be told, Jocko, get back in your box, beat it, son. It's embarrassing. As Eva's pointed out, everything this guy does is embarrassing and belittling Scotland.
Yeah, I don't see why anybody has any faith whatsoever in this guy. I have none. Before he was elected, well, let's say selected. Before he was selected, I would say that, I did say that I will not support him, and that if he does win it or is declared winner, we should fight to remove him as quickly as possible. If Mr. Continuity to do nothing, he lacks the gumption, the wit, the will, and the ability to be anything other than a patsy and a quizzling traitor, just as his predecessor was. He'll sail us down the river. He loves the big. This is the big ego trip that's getting played here. He's the big I am. You alluded to it earlier when he was in putting the surgical scrubs on. Then he went out in the Ministry of Transport. He does everywhere he goes. You get this big I am. Even the hilarious failed scooter skit. That's like a comedy joke, but that was all set up with cameras, timed. Go Hamza, off he goes, and then the wee sidekick beside him, running along beside him, only for catastrophe to befall him. Well, the catastrophe has befallen the Scots because this clown, the spineless weasel, this guy who is completely controlled and manipulated by the British state and those that would keep us on our knees, is not going to go off his knees, and he's not going to do anything to further the cause of independence. Look at the alignment with the status quo. Look at the kowtowism, as I spoke earlier. This guy lacks the ability, never mind the intent, of doing anything other than looking after himself, getting a zero massage and seeing what's in it for him. The guy is a waste of space. So no, there's no surprise to me whatsoever. Section 3. How many carrots? I mean, how many carrots do you look at and eat before you get sick of them? Before people cotton on, it's never going to happen. What are you talking about? We know it was never going to happen. That's why I didn't have any faith in two candidates, because there's only one candidate that I saw had a viable plan, that really took us towards independence, and that was Ash Reagan. The other two were Hamza is continuation 100%, and Kate was a bit half and half. But really, when it came down to things that mattered, if you're not in for what Alba has pushed and for an actual attempt at independence and a strategy that doesn't include Section 30, then you're not taking it seriously and you're not serving the people of Scotland. And the people of Scotland, more and more of us are catching on to it. So we'll soon find out whether these increased numbers and whether these people will have a change of heart, but I doubt it. They'll do exactly what they're told, because they wouldn't be in place if they weren't going to do exactly what they were told. So I'm afraid we've got a big fight in our hands, or the SNP will quickly become irrelevant, because if they continue with this devolution crap, then more and more SNP supporters are getting further and further. I mean, some of the old guard are finally giving up. I've got huge respect for people like Lloyd and many others who are staying there and trying to fight the fight from within, because sometimes you've got to do that. And if we want to save the SNP, we need to remove people like Hamza and his ilk from the leadership.
Yvonne, Phil's hit it on the head. You know, it's about carrots. It's almost a last with Section 30, and that covers the base about we're not doing anything for independence. And then a further insult to us. Now, we've been discussing for weeks, and we'll have some little chat on it today, but the missing money, the camper van, the police arresting people, an inquiry into their affairs, their financial affairs. And we're led to believe by a lot of SNP bots that suddenly there's been a membership surge. People are saying, oh, look, they're under investigation for fraud. I think I'll join that party. That sounds the very place for me. We're meant to believe this, that they try to tell us that 3,000 people joined in a week. It's just an insult to everyone to think that we would fall for these bloody lies and this capitulation.
It's, as I said last week, they've run the party like an organised crime group. And I have to say, I was watching First Minister's questions yesterday, and I had to laugh when a couple of the comments that I'd made in Prism last week were repeated by Anas Sarwar and the Tory leader. I keep forgetting his name. Anyway,
Douglas Ross.
Sorry?
Douglas Ross.
Yes, that's the dude.
But he is unforgettable. I mean, he's instantly forgettable. I wouldn't beat yourself up.
Well, anyway, yeah, they both repeated things that we said last week on Prism, which is, if they're watching, hello, register, because you obviously haven't so far. But this is really shameful. I agree with much of what Phil said, but I am very disappointed with Ash Reagan. I think she has fallen by the wayside. I wouldn't have expected her to. I would have expected her to come out of that trumped up theatrical spectacle of the leadership race with a legal challenge. Because if what we're being told is true, I don't believe for 1 minute that there's been 3,000 numpties that have decided to sign up and become part of a criminal enterprise. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that at all. But what I do believe is that until I see concrete evidence to contradict it, I think the membership has dipped below 50,000, which if it has, then it puts a huge question mark on the legality and the legitimacy of Hamza Yusuf emerging as the credible winner. And I would have thought that Ash Reagan would have challenged that. And I'm just a little disappointed in her that she hasn't. You know, she's this fiery, dramatic redhead, very clever, very articulate, but she's just disappeared. And
well, I think, in fairness to Ash, I don't. The old story: he who wields the knife never wears the crown, and that's a fact. But I thought it would be down to a lot of SNP members. If I was still a member of the SNP, I would have made a legal challenge.
well,
I would have got together with a group of my. Like, if we were all still in the SNP, I'd have got and said, "Listen, guys, how about us all chipping in some money? I want to make a legal challenge because I'm uncomfortable with this." So I'm not so down on Ash or Kate, for that matter, either. I think SNP members should have certainly made a challenge on it.
Well, I wasn't that impressed by Kate's reaction again after the leadership battle. She seemed to fall in line far too quickly and acquiesce to this, as I say, questionable leadership race. And yet the SNP continue to insult people's intelligence. You know, this news that 3,000 new members, you know, do me a favor.
And yet 25,000 members didn't vote. They were so enthused, 25,000 of their members, almost a third of their membership, didn't bother to vote at all. The two things don't tie up.
And I've met far too many people who say that they left the SNP but still got a vote. And just yesterday, somebody told me that they were a lapsed member and yet they still got to vote. So the whole, you know, there's just a whole question mark over the legitimacy of Humza Yousaf as First Minister. And, you know, if I were him, I would, you know, he's talking about transparency. Well, I would open the books, go the whole hog and let people see exactly how many members there are. And if he has won legitimately, then it'll shut up the likes of me who say, well, you know, I'm not quite convinced. There's that something isn't right. And for the majority of SNP members who are still, which promotes the idea of a cult, who are still in total denial that there's any wrongdoing. I'm coming across members all the time who are still defending Chief Mammy, and it really is. It makes Charles Manson and his cult look like a Tupperware party by comparison.
Yeah, and be assured that the next move by them all is with this Section 35 they're going to fight. Any of us who refuse to back that Section 35 are going to be called unionist enablers and unions because, you know, you're defending Scottish democracy. No, we're not. Nonsense. We're voting by opposing it. We're supporting Scottish in the democracy because the majority of people don't want it. Eva, this while this is all going on, and we've touched quickly on it, our former First Minister made an appearance in front of the cameras. She must have been dried there. We know she doesn't like the cameras. Whereupon she informed us how she was traumatised to find out. I wish I could remember the exact words, but along she says her worst nightmares that there was a police probe. She didn't know how it happened. You know, to find out that her husband had lent them 107,000, how there was a camper van in her mother-in-law's driveway. She never thought to ask her mother-in-law, you know, you don't drive, you're 92 years of age, why is there a luxury camper van in your driveway? It was all a big shock to her. And she made it all about her. You don't know how it's traumatized me. I'm suffering because of a police inquiry into the mess I left behind me. Quite a bizarre interview, is it not?
Well, you see this ego that has infiltrated the Scottish National Party in the last few years. It's an infection. And it looks like one that Humza has probably also caught. Because what Nicola Sturgeon's job was and what Humza's job now is, and she's failed at it miserably, as we know, and we're afraid that he will too, is to build the self-esteem and the self-confidence and the self-worth of our country. Because, you know, to paraphrase Alex Salmon from earlier in the week, a country or a nation without self-worth and self-confidence and self-belief is not a nation at all. And that's where we risk being. And there is so much that has gone on in the last couple of weeks, last couple of months, that justifies the belief that the SNP have completely lost their way. And to get Scotland and get the independence movement back on track again, we need to rebuild that self-worth and self-confidence and self-belief every single day, because our hopes and our dreams have been repeatedly trampled on. You know, just and to go back slightly to the Stone of Destiny, what dawned on me was we weren't told when the Stone of Destiny was being moved. We didn't know that it was happening until it had been done. There was no advance warning. It was a secret. We knew it was likely to happen because we knew that Humza had done nothing about taking a stand. But it was, in effect, sneaked out by a couple of dozen people who were obviously sworn to secrecy just to satisfy that particular agenda. And that is entirely wrong. And that secrecy on its own tells you all you need to know about Humza Yousaf's motivation. Because I cannot, for the life of me, imagine the likes of Alex Salmond, Kenny McCaskill, Jim Sillars, if he'd ever been in the leadership, any of these people keeping that a secret from the people of Scotland. They'd have made a stand about it not going, and then they would have pumped up the belief of Scots in ourselves as a nation by telling everybody when it was happening and saying to folk, I don't like it, I've tried to argue against it, but I'm sorry, they've beaten me this time. But, you know, I tried. He never even tried. And that issue of him not understanding politics and people and what people need and want to see is exactly the problem that Nicola Sturgeon had. She appeared in front of that camera only to make a fool of herself, but I think she thought that she was persuading us that A, she's innocent, and B, she was a rabbit caught in the headlights, and that all these things that had unfolded around about her were entirely surprising, not of her making. She hadn't colluded with anybody. She'd obviously not read Wings Over Scotland. She'd clearly not taken into account the context of the accounts that she signed off. And it was all such a dreadful mistake and a dreadful shock and surprise for her. What a lot of utter rubbish. The only person who believes that is herself. There was nobody watching that interview that believed one word of it. Even John Swinney was standing behind her, and you could see the look on his face over a period of time as she continued, in effect, to, you know, keep digging a big hole for herself. Scotland deserves better. We deserve leaders who are capable, experienced, efficient, driven, and who prioritise the needs of the people of this country, not this. It's, you know, it's almost like something out of the pages of Hello magazine or something. It's, you know, dramatic issues about she appeared and how did she look and what did she have to say. Who gives a flying fig what she had to say? She's history, and she needs to remember that she's history. Sit up the back benches, because for the time being, that's exactly where she deserves to be. I don't see her lasting the length of this parliament. I think she'll be gone long before the next Holyrood election. But in the meantime, actually, hell mend her for the damage that she's done to this country and to the aspirations of the people of the movement that put her there, paid her wages, and gave her undying loyalty for year after year after year. You know, I know people, relatives of mine included, who could ill afford the contributions they made every month to that party. And to now know that some of it was used on stuff that it ought not to have been used for, that was not promoting the cause of independence, is offensive in the extreme.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we've on this show and I in blogs have put forward, Phil, people saying, well, you're just critical. We've told you what you've got to do. What had to be done when a new leader came in after Nicola Sturgeon is they had to bring in someone to do a forensic audit of the books, a forensic audit of the membership, and that would have also encouraged the new auditors, because they said there's a clean bill of health, take over. But they're just continuing to lie and deny and deflect. I mean, this week when Mr. Beattie got caught on like a rabbit in the headlights by Sky News, and they said, well, did you know about this luxury van? They went, no, I didn't know about it. And then we've got down Stephen Flynn saying he only found out in February, only in February. But what did he do, Phil? He didn't. He backed the continuity candidate, the people who had been hiding all this. He said he was in the dark about it, but he still supported continuing on with that kind of behaviour. It's quite bizarre.
Yeah, not actually at all bizarre. These are all policemen and policewomen. They're doing and saying exactly what they were supposed to do and say. Every one of them continues the continuity agenda, continues to keep the bodies hidden, to minimise damage, when what they're really doing is they've played right into the hands of the 77th, they've played right into the hands of MI5 and those that would destroy the independence movement for the security of the Union. And remember, the IRA were infiltrated by these people when they were the biggest threat to the stability of the Union. That is no longer the biggest threat to the stability of the Union. Scottish independence is. And if you think for 1 second that the people who infiltrated the IRA can outsmart these clowns, these utter chancers, and find the chinks in their armour and massage the egos and blackmail them. Well, we talked about it before. I know 3 things that Nicola was definitely that would have been blackmailed over. And God knows, and if I know 3, MI5 know 33 probably, or they'll create stuff or create the smoke screen to do it. But working back, Stephen Flynn, I know Stephen, or I knew Stephen quite well when he was a councillor, and we were doing Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire independence campaign, right up to 2014. He's lying, and he's doing what he's told. Stephen, disappointing, mate. Again, you got the big job. He's a clever, young, able man, but he's sold out. There's no way Ian Blackford didn't update him, or even if they're in different camps, those who are transferred over, i.e. the SPADs, will have informed them, because you don't get in from your predecessor. You get the package written up by the SPADs that was done from the past leader to the next one. So there is continuity. That's what it's designed for, and that's exactly what's happening. With Colin, I think he stated he didn't know about it at the time. It was bought, but found out when he later examined the accounts, when he was brought back in, examined the accounts. But it wasn't the same price because it'd been devalued over a year or whatever. Colin, you're full of porky pies, mate. With Nicola, going back to a couple of things that were said earlier, the trauma, she's a liar. She has betrayed us, thought she had impunity, and is now paying the price, as I'll say it again, for dancing with the devil for her own gains. She sold her soul, the very soul of what keeps us, gives us the passion, and makes us do what we do in the face of all comers, all threats, and all dangers. These people lack the courage to represent the people of Scotland in an independence movement. And remember the elderly relative of the Murrells who had the camper van parked up, doesn't even drive. And the whole thing, what you're seeing from Stephen Flynn, Beattie, and all the rest of them, have you noticed the increased activity from a lot of MPs? Just in the last week, you'll see, and it's a mechanism, it's the business as usual mantra that's been played out right now. When you're under pressure, and we see it, I saw it many times when we were at Westminster, the advice you're getting from headquarters, the advice you're getting, number one, they'll give you advice that protects Nicola. Once Nicola's protected, they then move on to the next phase, which is making sure that the party and eventually you are protected. And what you advise, you stay quiet for a bit, usually a week. Social media, it's people with, it's almost a goldfish bowl philosophy. People are not going to dig into the accounts and look for the evidence. They'll see the smoke and believe there's a fire. And I don't blame folk for that, because we don't have the time to get into the detail to investigate all of this like a proper investigative journalism would do, if there were any left, I hasten to add, with the exception of our colleague here, Yvonne. But I see that rule, the business as usual, being played out. You stay quiet for a bit, usually a week or two, and then adopt the nothing to see here, folks. Business as usual. I'm doing this for this charity. I'm doing that. I'm fighting for the people. I was there. I'm writing to you to tell you what I did as your MP. That's all been unfurled now because they think they're over the worst of it. And they don't realise that it's entirely up to Her Majesty's government and those who would derail the independence movement, to decide when they have had enough. They're absolutely the mercy of people who have no mercy. So hell mend them, but they're damaging the cause, and that's what I will never forgive them for.
Yvonne, the other thing that was going on this week, on keeping with Stephen Flynn, he was saying, it's vitally important to protect devolution. He wanted to see, if you could stick up that one, Techie, he wanted to see energy devolved to Edinburgh to protect devolution, give us energy. Correct me if I'm wrong, Yvonne, shouldn't you be saying, devolve the lot to us, we're going, we want independence, we don't want more devolution. It seems they're pushing us towards it.
Yeah, the D word has cropped up several times in the last week. So independence watchers, just watch out for it now, because they're going to start pushing Devo Max. We're coming up to very testing times for the SNP, for Alipur, for the other independence parties. We really are all under fire at the moment. But if the British government or the establishment thinks that it has snuffed out the flame of independence in Scotland, they are so, so wrong. And this is why we have to turn out in huge numbers at the All Under One Banner March and show them you can destroy the SNP, you can meddle with the political party, you can cause turmoil. Yes, you've succeeded in doing that, but you will never kill the idea of independence from the people of Scotland. And, you were talking about Westminster there, about Stephen Flynn. I don't know who the hell is advising them, but you can tell that Murray Foote, the chief spin doctor, is off the scene now, because some muppet in SNP headquarters thought it would be a wonderful idea to show a grinning Stephen Flynn sitting having a drink with his new best friend,
Blackwood.
And the pair of them are sitting there grinning, and the optics was so bad because you could almost see bubbles coming out of their mouths, thinking we've conned them yet again. Ha, ha, ha. Meaning the SNP members, the independent supporters. And the pair of them were sitting, all cuddly-buddly, lamb and honey, when they were fighting like ferrets in a sack just a couple of days earlier. So some spad obviously thought, let's have a picture of the pair of them laughing. But the optics were just so wrong on that picture. And of course, the biggest laugh has been had by Angus Robertson, who we found out got a 30 grand backhander for taking over the SNP leadership.
Yeah. And I think he deserves a backhander, but not quite that kind of backhander.
Well,
one of them.
I'm very curious about Angus Roberts. I mean, he was perilously close to becoming Mossad's man, according to the Al Jazeera documentary Inside the Lobby. And the agent Shai Massot, who was expelled from London, said that was drooling over how wonderful Angus Robertson was. But I'm very curious about Angus Robertson, because we know that he was parachuted into the seat in Edinburgh to prevent Joanna Cherry from getting in to that seat. He took the power away from the NEC. He flits around the world on junkets and jollies, and I'm just not quite sure what his role is in all of this. But he doesn't seem to have tightened his belt at all in these very testing times, not only for his party, but for all of us. And, he's known as Air Miles Angus. there's a lot that is rotten in Westminster, but going back again to Eva's comments about Nicola Sturgeon and her ego appearing on the steps of Holyrood, you know, I could almost smell the sulphur from that gathering, and it reminded me of her greatest nemesis, Margaret Thatcher, who could never accept that she was no longer leader of the Tories. And Nicola Sturgeon is still finding it very difficult to accept that she's nothing more than a backbencher with a horrific legacy behind her. I was watching First Minister's Questions the other day, and this scandal of the ferries is horrific. And Humza Yousaf's answer to all the criticism coming over about the ferries, when he was told the people in the Western Isles will never forgive the SNP for this whole ferry fiasco, he turned round as bold as brass and said, just remember, both the MSPs in the Western Isles are SNP. And I thought, yeah, but not for much longer with that sort of attitude. And this this attitude that the SNP has of being entitled to those seats in the Western Isles and the seats all around Scotland, that is the voters are going to hit them where it hurts, which is in the ballot box. And it's, you know, it's inevitable. There are going to be people who, when it comes to vote, are going to be in excruciating pain, because somebody like myself, even if I had a gun put to my head, I couldn't put a cross next to a Tory. I just couldn't. But, you know, people's choices are going to be so limited. And I actually feel like that with the SNP. I'll never vote Tory. I'll never vote SNP. And I'm just hoping that you know, that I don't find myself in that situation, because
I'm hoping that someone somehow someday soon can cleanse the SNP and make them votable again. We've got to live in hope for that. But if I could make an observation, Yvonne, you'll notice your dog was very quiet. You mentioned the name of Margaret Thatcher and the dog started barking. Not a coincidence there. That's a sensible dog.
Yeah.
Eva, the other thing, when the Supreme Court, people have forgotten this, November the 23rd, 2022, I haven't forgotten the date, never will, when the Supreme Court said, you know, bang your box, jocks, you're not going to be allowed to hold a referendum. And we get promised 119 days later there was going to be a conference, and of course that didn't happen because they put it off because there was a leadership election. The first thing they did, of course, was the Section 35. We're fighting that. There's still no talk of a special convention to talk about what's the tactic for independence now that we don't have we don't have the right as far as the Supreme Court. What we're going to do? It didn't hold that. We find that there's not going to be an independence referendum on the 19th of October this year. Now we heard this week that Stephen Flynn saying the SNP are going to fight this next UK general election on domestic issues. So that means there's now the other promise broken. There's not going to be a plebiscite election in UK 24. There is nothing that they keep their word on, be it a publicly owned power company, whether it's a convention. And we're certainly not going to get a constitutional convention from this lot. We've got to take independence out of there, and we've got to take it to the movement.
Roddy, one reason I really like social media, especially Twitter, is that it reminds you of things that sometimes are extremely important, and their significance can be reinforced depending on what events are happening in your life or in the country's life at the time. And I was reminded this week that it's the anniversary of Jimmy Reid's great speech when he became rector of Glasgow University. And his speech was entitled Alienation. We all know it. It's a rat race, and a rat race is not for rats. But remember Jimmy Reid's other great quote when he was asked why he left the Labour Party, and he said, didn't he? He said, the Labour Party left me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's where the SNP are going to end up if they continue making false promises to people and constantly let us down. I've said so many times before, I voted SNP in 21, I voted SNP also in 22. I doubt very much whether I'll be doing it again, but you know, we all agree here that the application to the Supreme Court was a wrong move. It was a bad move, and when it inevitably failed, it was meekly lapped up. There was no argument. There was acceptance on the part of the Scottish Government that the Supreme Court had ruled and had ruined Scotland's chances in a legal context of holding a referendum. Now, what should have happened immediately after that, and should still happen now, is the creation of the Constitutional Convention, because most countries on the planet that gained independence did so by having a vehicle of that nature. And the good thing about such a convention is that you're not restricted to elected politicians. You can take in knowledgeable civic leaders and people who are respected in the country too. And so the intellectual and political abilities and strategies and guile are all available to put to the best use for the country as a whole. Now, that is something that ought to have been done long ago. It should be done now. What ought not to happen is that the members of the Scottish independence movement should not allow the SNP to emphasise the need to defend devolution or to defend Scotland's democracy, because the best way to defend Scotland's democracy is by standing up and fighting for Scotland's independence. And that is what each and every SNP and ALBA MP and MSP was elected to do. They were not elected, as we've said so many times, to settle down. They were elected to settle up. Now, the ideal opportunity for Stephen Flynn to dissociate himself from the rule of his predecessor, and again, the ideal opportunity for Humza Yousaf to dissociate himself from Nicola Sturgeon, is to require that their MPs at Westminster support Neil Hanvey's self-determination bill. The purpose of that bill is to give to the Scottish Parliament the right to hold a lawful referendum on Scottish independence at a time of the choosing of the Scottish people. There is nothing in that bill that runs contrary to any of the stated priorities and the founding principles of the SNP. Now, we know that there were several SNP MPs who supported the bill at its first reading. My understanding is that between then and now, no additional SNP MPs have given their support, but they should. And each of them should be challenged by their constituents and asked to give it support. And if they refuse so to do, they should be required to explain in writing and at public meetings and on the doorsteps why they do not support it. It is the founding principle of that party, and it is exactly what they were elected to achieve. If they don't support the bill, that will come back to haunt them at every election from now until Scotland is independent. So in the real world, if it's Scottish independence that is Stephen Flynn's priority, he would be phoning Humza Yousaf this minute, talking to him about a constitutional convention and talking in terms of a Scotland United front next year for the Westminster election, rather than posing for artificial photo shoots in a bar with a pint of Guinness and some fancy Prosecco cocktail. The people of Scotland did not come up the Clyde in a banana boat, and we ought not to be treated as if we did. It is high time that the SNP did what it says on the tin and fight for Scottish independence and not settle down like yellow bellies, because that is what they have become.
We are indeed, Phil. Now, we're all here. We're the old fundamental wing of the SNP. Now, when you stood for Parliament and went to Parliament, Phil, did it cross your mind you were going down there to defend devolution? Because that seems what they're doing now. I mean, I now ask the question rhetorically almost, what is the point of the SNP?
There isn't one with its current leadership. The SNP remains the vehicle and the vehicle for independence, because not enough people who support independence have been persuaded or have finally admitted to themselves that we're being betrayed. And my heart goes out to these folks, because that was me, that was you at one point, Roddy, and all of us. You know, we all say, oh, no, it can't be that classic dichotomy between loyalty and speaking the truth.
Yep.
And politics doesn't go hand in hand with speaking the truth. It's what's effective and what you say. And that sounds a terrible thing to say, but that's just Machiavelli. That's just life. That's just people. We don't have the time to go into the detail and everything. The people who are interested and do dig for themselves get there eventually, but it takes a lot of work. And God forbid, you know, your priorities are your family and your work to provide for your family. And if you get a wee bit of spare time, then whatever hobbies you might have, you know, nobody's interested in finding out the economics of a country or looking at the accounts of a country, drilling into the detail, finding alternative sources, comparing, and then doing an analysis of them and learning how it all works. It's a massive undertaking to understand what's going on in politics and when politicians are lying or when they're just giving you lip service. And it's patently obvious that they're not doing it right now. Right now, it's appalling, absolutely appalling what's going on. What is the point of the SNP? It's always recoverable. It's always recoverable. A change of leadership, a proper clean out, as I've said from the beginning, and stop pretending that everything's okay. You're liars. We know it's not. It's patently obvious it's not. You're behaving as if you want devolution. You'll take devolution because you'll do exactly what you're told, so long as you stay in the gravy train and you line your own pockets. You're not good enough. The current incumbents are not good enough and need to be made to pay the price. And that has to be where it hurts them most, in their pockets. So get rid of them out of their jobs. Get rid of them out of their high profile. Because a lot of these people wax lyrical when they're on TV, the excitement, the competitiveness I saw. There was some of us who were very used to public speaking and very used to dealing with high octane situations, aggressive situations that I'm used to, for example, in dispute resolution and arbitration. And you found that the roles that I'm best suited, or Philippa Whitford was best suited, or some of the other experts that we had, because we were unknown entities, we did not come up through the ranks of the party. They couldn't discern whether or not we would be truly loyal to the party. When you're being appraised, you're asked, is there any, one of the questions you'll get asked when you're being checked out, whether you could be a candidate or not, are there any policies that the party have that you disagree with? And if you say yes, you're not doing your chances very much good. So when I was asked that question, even though there was a few, there wasn't any major. The big one for me was NATO. I thought it was extremely naive at the time to not be in NATO, because that's where the powers that could, and are currently stopping us from being independent would have their biggest justification for doing so. So I, at the time, was very happy that the SNP discussed it and we voted to join NATO and to abandon our previous policy. I have since reverted to our previous policy when I've saw what NATO have done and who they work for and what carnage we wreak is being wreaked in our name across the planet to innocent and men, women and children all over the world. So no, what can we say about that? It's tragic. It's absolutely tragic, but it is recoverable, Roddy. We can get it back, and I know for a fact that it's about getting the timing right. When enough of the current incumbents agree that the time is right, now we play our hand, and you have the switch, the takeovers, and that's politicking, that's whipping, That's the inside people within the SNP. There are various camps. When they have the numbers, they should act. I'm really disappointed they've not acted already, because I believe the time was right, the numbers was right, and they've been corralled again. They have been corralled and they're back in their pen, and they're being watched very carefully. So get up, rise up, show you've got a spine, as we've all said, and show us what leadership means. Show us what it is to be a true independentista, and you'll have the backing of the people of Scotland.
Just on a slight anecdotal story on I discussed it before, the NATO, where I was on the other side. I was opposed to NATO and still am. But the thing was, it was a very contentious issue at the time. It was one of the best debates in any political party, as I've said often, in any conference. But throughout it and after it, there was there was none of this that we're getting just now with the GRRD bill, where people were falling out, you were getting attacked and just slandered and abused. That's the way democracy should work, but that's a side issue. But the clock's cricking on, and there's a couple of items I want to get out, ladies and gentlemen, before we go away. And one of them is this, Yvonne. We all know, we've talked about it so much, how bad things are in the UK with the economy. People are struggling like Belial. But I'm sure you were really reassured this week when the governor of the Bank of England, on an annual salary of £575,538 per annum, told us that we would all have to get used to being poorer. Now, when a man of earning £575,538 tells you that, I'm sure you thought, well, that sounds fair. Did you, Yvonne? I love when you got muted, because when you're ready to let one go. See?
Yeah. You can rake around a cowpat, a giant cowpat like his, for hours and hours trying to find a pearl or a speck of gold. And there's nothing there. Once again, we have the rich and privileged telling us how we have to get used to being poorer. And it's so insulting. And to have somebody, it's like watching somebody pole vaulting over mouse shit. Really, it's just ridiculous. And why the media didn't challenge him more and give him such a hard time. But I'm really becoming increasingly bewildered by my colleagues in the media. And I'm just thinking of Leslie Riddick, for one, who wrote the most ridiculous piece in that rag, The National. Of course, she has to shore up the SNP. But as she wrote this ridiculous article telling us two wrongs don't make a right, and we should just move on.
I forget about the financial rigging. Yeah.
Balderdash. Move on from what? And the arrogance of her statement shows how out of touch she is with the independence movement. And I know it'll hurt her taking this from a Geordie, but that is the plain truth. She has lost touch with the independence movement. She has no idea how hurt so many people are. She has no idea how infuriated people are when Chief Mammy suddenly popped up. I haven't been arrested. I haven't spoken to the police, but you have no idea of the nightmare that I am going through. Pour me another drink. It's just, I don't know what's wrong with Leslie Riddick. I used to be such an admirer of her work. She spoke, she dealt a straight bat, she fired from the hip, and she was a woman of integrity. And now, maybe she needs a column in the National, I don't know. But personally, I would tell the National to clear off. They're as in much trouble as the SNP. It doesn't matter how much lipstick you put on that pig, the National is still a pig. its circulation is dipping below 5,000 on some days, and it's
not as many as us. We've got a bigger circulation.
Well, the subscription, which is the bread and butter, which every newspaper relies on, is 200 to 300. The paper is on its way out, just like the SNP, and they can hit the decks or they can listen to us. Only good friends tell you how bad things are. And, we have been telling the SNP for more than a year now, rein it in, control the ego, focus on independence. And if they had just taken our advice, things would be quite different today.
Yeah, but we're the enemy. We're the unions. We're unionist enablers. That's because we tell the truth. People don't like the truth. People don't like uncomfortable truths. They prefer nice lies, and that has been proved time and time again. Again, I realise the clock's kicking on, and you viewers don't realise what that means. We're now, because we try, if we keep these below an hour, it cuts our costs dramatically if we don't go over an hour. Anyway, but we don't. We keep going. Eva, I'm doing a special midweek, as you know, and you're assisting me, my dear friend, just as well, on the government's plans, the Scottish Government's plans to change some things in our justice system. And I would just like to make a small comment on it. You know, they want to get rid of the not proven verdict. They want to get rid of juries on sexual cases. And they want to reduce, when they are having a jury, they want to reduce it from 15 to 12. I think it's more to bring us, they want to bring us in line with England. Why? I do not know. On the jury size, I might be wrong. But just a quick comment from you on what they're planning here, because the legal profession in the main are not happy with this, are they? As we will find out on Wednesday, folks. Don't miss it.
Not at all. What has to be said at the outset, though, Roddy, is that the statistics in relation to convictions for rape and serious sexual assaults are very, very low.
Sure.
And that's the starting point, if you like. And I have to stress that everybody involved in the justice system deserves justice. And I mean that from the perspective of victims, their family and friends, as well as accused persons. We want justice. We don't want miscarriages of justice. And although there's been some consultation and there's been some recommendations, most specifically by a High Court judge, in respect of how to address these difficulties, especially in rape and sexual assault cases, I think that the proposal that there be judge-led exclusion of jury trials in these offences is one which perhaps uniquely has attracted very serious criticism from the legal profession as well as throughout the general public. And it's because of the concern that if you have a jury trial, whether it's 15 or 12 members of a jury, these people are anonymous. They're not able to be nobbled. They're not subsequently held accountable for their decisions. One single judge on their own is known, is identifiable, and is more likely or more able to be influenced. You know, it's far easier to manipulate one person who's identified than it is to manipulate a dozen or more who are not identified. But if you leave that to one side and look at the bigger picture, what Angela Constance, as the new Justice Secretary, claimed, and she, like previous Justice Secretaries, with the exception of Kenny McCaskill, of course, has no legal qualifications. What she has claimed is that international best practice, that's the three little words that were repeated ad nauseam in the GRR debate, she said international best practice supports these moves. What she has not made plain is that there has been zero, nil research in Scotland with real jury members. Because when you finish your jury service, you walk away, that's the end of that. The research in Scotland was done with a mock
Scottish mock, yeah.
So the results are not accurate and they are not reliable. What I would suggest is needed, and this is obviously an enormous topic, very, very worthy of substantial, detailed, knowledgeable discussion by experts, and I am no expert in this. But what I think is wrong is that there needs to be better education in the context of what's to be expected in a trial for something as sensitive and life-changing, and for some people, life-shattering instances of rape and sexual assaults. Because I think you would find, if you speak to most jurors, they would tell you that they do not suffer from the bias or the assumptions that some interested parties say they do, because the people I know who've sat in juries did their level best to do their public duty to the best of their ability. They were neither flippant, nor ignorant, nor stupid. And that is, I think, the great value of the jury system, that people expect to be judged by their peers, but also by a wide cross-section of society, not by one judge on their own who is likely to bring their own bias, because those single judges are likely, in the main, to be middle-aged white men. A jury, on the other hand, can be as diverse and as inclusive as Scottish society is. Yeah. And that's one of the greatest things of my profession and our justice system. And I'd be very sad to see it eroded. And I hope that the consultation which takes place and the proper process through the Scottish Parliament is conducted in a fashion of which, perhaps for the first time for a while, we might be able to be proud. Finally, can I add one tiny little thing? In sexual offence trials, including rape, the accused is not allowed to represent themselves because they're not allowed to cross-examine the complainer, the victim. If lawyers boycott, these trials will not be able to proceed because there will be no defence for the accused, and the trial can't go ahead with the accused self-representing. So there's a lot in there which I'm sure you'll be discussing appropriately next week.
Correct. So I hope you all folks are listening. If you're interested in that, please watch next Wednesday. But a couple of things. Remember, I can't remember what it was about, but remember the 3 appeal court judges, and they were all over the sun getting called traitors and treasonous for something to do with Brexit or something, was it not? Can you remember that case where the newspapers, you're on mute, Yvonne? And you're still on mute. It was 3.
It was the enemy of the people.
Yeah, that was it. So that's the kind of thing, exactly what you're talking about, if it could happen. But the other thing is, am I right in saying, one of the reasons it's a difficulty on sexual offences, corroboration, because rapists don't tend to take a witness along with them. And it's a question of one word against the other word. So that also adds to the difficulties in getting conviction rates.
Yeah, well, the worst instances, the most difficult instances are those where there is, no independent corroboration, where there's one perpetrator and one victim. And those are very, very difficult circumstances. There are a number of lawyers who would certainly have sympathy with that position, and who would be able to give good advice, reliable advice to the Scottish Government about how best to deal with this. I mean, I saw there's a mountain of stuff on social media about this kind of thing, but it is such a sensitive topic that it deserves to be addressed fully and at large, with all relevant views being taken into account. Because the point of the exercise is not to end up with a league table of convictions which become, for whatever reason, unsafe and result in appeals and findings of miscarriages of justice. The point of the exercise is to get justice. And justice for the victims will be achieved if there's proof beyond reasonable doubt. Proof beyond reasonable doubt will be found by the jury if they are fully educated in relation to what it is that they're looking at, and they rule on matters of credibility and reliability, because that's why they're there in the first place, because members of the public are judged to be able to decide these things. We do it in our daily lives. So,
okay, on that, I've been worked up. There was what you were talking about, the Scottish mock juries. Professor Cheryl Thomas KC down in England. She was a member at London University faculty. She did it with actual jurors. Anyway, that'll all be introduced on Wednesday. We'll discuss it. Can I just thank the three of you for your contributions today? It's been fabulous as always to get chatting with you. And you viewers, I hope you've enjoyed this. And just to remind you two things, the 6th of May, to hell with the coronation, get your arse into Glasgow to Kelvin Grove Park and let's march for Scotland and for Scottish independence. There you go. Thanks, Techie, putting that up. 11:30, assemble Kelvin Grove Park. And as you go down the high street towards the Glasgow Green, folks, there's a cracking fish and chip shop on the left-hand side. You'll love it. And the other thing is, to remind all those who are going to the Alapa conference on the 13th of May, that Prism here, unfortunately not with our Phil, but we have a fantastic substitute. Well, how can you substitute such a man as the Coatbridge Cavalier? We have a stand-in, shall we say. We're going to be doing a show with a live audience in the Beaufort Hotel, 6:30 on the Saturday. Look forward to seeing as many of you as you like. But until we do see you again, please, you and yours, take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.